Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie, and I'm here in my glass house. It's a little chilly today in North San Diego, and there's a rainstorm going on. So you might hear some wind and some rain on my rooftop of my glass house. And if you're watching the video version, I'm a little chilly doing my cold therapy. But it's funny, chilly now is in the 50s here versus living in Seattle. 50s was, I think, warmer. 60 degrees was hot. So a little different down here. But hey, I'm going to talk to my friend, Dr. Anna Cabeca today. She is the author of the Hormone Fix, Keto-Green 16, and she has a new book out coming soon. And I think when this comes out, it should be launched. It's called MenuPause. Great name. It's about different food plans for people going through menopause. So I wanted to have her on the show to talk about what we can do as the aging athlete, female athletes, to prepare for menopause. So I want to be that person that doesn't have any symptoms, hot flashes, weight gain, skin issues, all this other stuff we might find with menopause. But we're going to relate this to the athlete, the female athlete, as well as men. You should listen to this as well. We're going to talk about keto and fasting and carb timing for women and men, but, diving into a little bit of menstrual cycles, when we should eat more carbs and when we can go lower carb, when's a good time of our cycle to do fasting, and how do we balance out those hormones as we get a little bit older. And as athletes, we tend to hammer our hormones with our exercise training sessions, really looking at your HPA axis. I would love for you to do the Dutch test and look at a GI map type of test, or Genova, and look at our organic acids panel and look at the food zoomer, the wheat zoomer, and really look at the whole picture of what you're doing now is helping you being fit and healthy from the inside out. And we're really striving to get ourselves to be fat adapted, to be burning fat as we spend most of our day, and be metabolic flexible so you can switch to burn carbs and go back to burning fat as your main fuel tank. But also we should be focused on performance gains now and in the future. So looking at your future self, looking at performance gains and longevity, I think is really important. And I think as athletes, we think we're superhuman, that we're these Marvel characters that we can do anything because we can do an Ironman or 50K race or 100-mile run. But we have to realize that's not good for our bodies. So, doing less is more philosophy, shorter workouts, more intensity some days, a lot more recovery, and more strength training is really important to being healthy, as well as what you eat, avoiding those inflammatory foods, working on your fasting, but also look at intuitive fueling and intuitive training. And I did create a website, Intuitive Fueling, on GoDaddy. So I've got that word because I think it's important for athletes to know, okay, once I'm fat adapted, past that, let's learn on how to be listening to our red flags, listen to our body signals, when we should break that fast. When should we eat before a workout? When should you be okay just having coffee, black coffee and water, and go for an hour workout, 2 hours, 3 hours? But when is that workout too long, or when is it too high of heart rate that you're causing more damage than good? So talk about that in the next few months on this show. But today's focus is on Dr. Anna, and her focus, her why is empowering women in their transition through menopause to own their own health and to really work on enjoying that process that we go through and not make it a big deal. We're going to talk about why people get stuck. How do we use these nutrition lifestyle habits to balance our hormones? So talking about the MenuPause, looking at different food plans. And why do we need different food plans? Because we're all different phases of life, different bodies, different microbiomes, different ancestry backgrounds, different training workouts. So really looking at, there isn't one size fits all, but there's different food plans that we can follow and know when to switch it up, like doing a carnivore reset for a month. And then I'm going to do more keto. And then this time of the month, I'm going to add a little bit more healthy carbs and be okay having sweet potatoes at nighttime with a steak, and listening to your body when you might do better eating before a workout and how long to wait after you work out to eat. So all that I really want to focus on in the show. But Dr. Anna is a great person to talk to for balancing our hormones with nutrition and talking about really how to optimize our health and enjoying the journey of life and not making different phases of life a big deal as menopause, and looking at her new book. So let's talk to Anna all things hormones and see how we can really optimize our health from the inside out with her Hormone Fix and Keto-Green and new book coming out. Okay, I have my favorite Hormone Fix expert, Dr. Anna, back on my podcast just in time for the new year. You're on the show last year to kick off the new year, Keto-Green. Now we're going to talk about more ways to get fit and healthy from the inside out in this new year. So thanks for joining me.
Oh my gosh. Great to be here with you as always, Debbie. And I love your audience too, asking good questions, bringing up good issues. And it's an important topic. So,
well, as I just turned 50 this last few months now, when this comes out, that, just
congratulations.
Thank you. But how we can prepare for menopause. And this show is low carb athlete, talking about athletes. So don't worry, we're going to talk about fasting and keto and how to, exercise with their hormone cycle. But I think it's so important to talk about how we can transition through this phase of life with ease. And we're going to talk about your new book out called the MenuPause, such a great name, and talk about that today. So
yes. It's menopause, not to be confused with the menopause, Huff,
oh yeah,
which can feel like that too in menopause. I mean, there's all these things that come up, right? Our hormones, our emotions, our cycles, our love life for sure. And I think that's why it's so important to address it in a fun way, but also in a sense of community, just bringing community in and saying, you're not alone. You're not alone.
Yeah. And that's what I think my new reignited passion is, to share this information for the athlete, the female athlete, because I don't think we are taking this information that we're getting out there from experts as yourself, and then apply them to people that are exercising a lot, maybe too much, and they're consistent with that, but let's fill in the missing pieces that they need to add into their routine to help embrace this process and make it as smooth as possible. And of course, I was working on longevity.
Yes. And I think this is where muscle is magic, right? When it comes to longevity and when it comes to menopause, muscle is magic. And this is where you and your audience have it right. You are focused on probably one of the hardest things for most women, exercise. Okay, Debbie, to be honest, let me just say, I'm talking about myself here. I will curl up with a book and read all day. That's my favorite thing to do. And I recognize that unless I can check off that exercise, movement, activity for the day, my day is not as good. And that's a challenge for many, many women. So, and the opposite for the athlete is exercising too much, right? It's not having that downtime or omitting the downtime to address especially in perimenopause and menopause, the physiologic changes that are already pushing more cortisol and more insulin resistance. So the little shifts that, really, like I would say, and curious about what you found, but it's really not big shifts. It's little shifts for the low carb athlete.
Yeah. And I think there's one thing that you've said, the stress. People often in endurance world do too much cardio. Chronic stress is another source of stress and causes that hormone imbalance, as you talked about. And what happened to me, adrenal exhaustion back in 2013, which is why I'm reignited, as I said, to focus this podcast to help people avoid going through what happened to me, because we think we're invincible. We think we're so fit and healthy because we can go do a 5-hour bike ride or do an Ironman or run a race. And I think people forget about what are you doing nutritionally? What are you doing to balance your hormones? Because that exercise that we're doing too much of is also contributing to leaky gut. A lot of people eat whatever they want, or maybe they're doing fasted exercise and keto, but they're doing it too much because I heard 50 grams of carbs a day is all I need. And I need to fast 16 hours to 24 hours. And, you know, that's not really the best for the female athlete. And I think it's great to kind of individualize everything, as we'll get into your new book, having different options. And I love the word pauses, that you like say different pause this and try this instead. So hormones and exercising, and as we age, and the female athlete are so important. And your book, The Hormone Fix, kind of the first of your books. Was that your first one you wrote?
The Hormone Fix, yeah, first official one. I've had workbook, my Women's Restorative Health workbook, and things like that, and ebooks. But yeah, The Hormone Fix, the first big published book.
So I think is an important part for people as we're aging, the aging athlete. But the hormones as we reach premenopause and menopause, what kind of happens? You talk about this, we'll get into your new book, but the hormones we want to talk about, and people should get your past books. They're so easy to read too. I like them because they're not like so many books I get. I read at night and I just like, my brain doesn't work at nighttime. And your book is just, everyone can understand what our hormones do. You make it easy to understand the whole process. So what are some hormones that we need to be aware of? And we'll talk about how to fix them with our nutrition.
Yeah, well, also, you know, a good acknowledgement to my amazing editors and copywriters, because like I would write 3-page case stories, right? Like, oh my gosh, and A, B, C, D, and this, that, the other thing, and so much detail, right? And this is what I really learned in working with an editor like from Penguin Random House, and a ghostwriter. I used Maggie Greenwood, and it's amazing. And they just like slashed and burned. It came to one paragraph, like a 3-page case story that I would present, right? Like so much detail and the slash and burn. So it really became like, okay, I want to communicate this so you can really understand it. And so from that and quickly, I mean, The Hormone Fix is still like in the top 5 of menopause books on Amazon. And we're 2 years out now almost. And so I learned that for Keto-Green 16, because it's complicated. 16, you know, key hormones, 16, you know, what about why we're doing the lifestyle hacks that we do, because it takes more than hormones to fix our hormones, and communicating in a way that we can receive it and take that next action step. So it's like this writing a book thing is a real process. And it's designed like it was in my heart to be designed to be for every woman, right? That you don't need a clinical background education, higher education to take this message and apply it into your life in actionable, really, you know, easily modifiable ways that it becomes easy.
Yeah. And I think it's great because a lot of people reading books don't understand, you know, the science behind it, just want the simple version. So I think it's great. I know Ben Greenfield, when he was listening to something about his book Boundless that he wrote, you know, which is gigantic, which is actually what my computer's sitting on because it's so big. I have it all the time with me, but it's, you know, he said he wrote it and it was still like twice as long, probably 1,000 pages. So I think, you know, you guys are so much experts and know so much information, and how to simplify it is the hard part. So let's talk about the key hormones that we need to be aware of that might affect our fat loss, performance, and longevity as we're reaching menopause. And then we'll get into strategies to repair them.
Yeah. And I think, especially as it applies to an athlete, right? And we hit on cortisol. And I think we'll talk about the sex hormones, but cortisol is so important to mention because it's derived from a key female hormone that we rely on, and that's progesterone, male and females, right? But especially females. Progesterone, and it is the precursor hormone to cortisol, to DHEA, to testosterone, to estrogen. And as our levels are plummeting, you know, with the, you know, our biologic clock, essentially, as the levels start to plummet in our mid 30s, early 30s, depending, you know, 30s to 40s, as that change starts happening, because we're kind of coasting at a very consistent way for at least 2 decades of our reproductive life. And then it starts to decline. And with added stress, take cortisol, like, so already ovarian function's going down, and now your cortisol's taking it down at an even faster rate. And so that intersection is where athletes have that rub first, right? That's the first place that they're having that rub. We're using cortisol to, that great athletic stress and performance that we thrive on, right? That drives up dopamine, that drives up the endorphins, and you're smiling big. You're like, oh yeah, give me that rush, right? Yeah. I don't get that, Debbie, about you. Just to be clear.
Yeah.
But as you're, that push, and we're really like pushing that cortisol, and that chronic cortisol, push is that key that unlocks the gate to the healthy membranes. So you start getting leaky membranes, whether it's leaky gut, leaky brain, leaky, vasculature. So increasing our risk for all the gastrointestinal diseases and inflammation. So we get arthritic complaints too, and very common in the athlete. And then of course, as older, the leaky brain, dementia, brain loss, memory loss, brain fog, and leaky vessels, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, decreased performance, calcifications of vessels. We can easily see those early on. If you've ever had a report that said benign calcifications on your mammogram, they're never benign, because that's showing you're having calcifications. And that means we need to reduce inflammation, improve circulation, and balance our hormones. So progesterone's the really big one that comes into play, and everything we can do to increase oxytocin, the hormone of love, bonding, and connection, over cortisol, and as a constant part of our day, through our thoughts, our practices, our, just our lifestyle, our self-talk, especially as we increase oxytocin, we have more fun and pleasure during our days. That's going to help us with dropping cortisol. And in so many ways, whether it's, the meditative practice, all of a sudden you'll see, well, I dropped 5 pounds. I didn't do anything but add 5 minutes of meditation per day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I just was saying that, I think yesterday I did a post, my 8 elements of the holistic method. One of them is happiness. And I said, what are you doing today to play, laugh, and be, silly? And I think, because I've said this about myself, when I was so probably in my adrenal exhaustion phase, I was so intense, so serious, and so worked up that I was, would burst into anger anytime. And I think it's stressed out easily, that I realize now that I need to, laugh and be silly and have stuff that makes you happy every day. And I think so many people, athlete or not, if you're that driven, ambitious, high performer, that you're trying to always do more every day and thrive on that addiction to busyness, those people are more susceptible to that burnout and breakdown, like happened to me, those hormones.
And you're not like alone in that too, that we'll call it menopausal madness, where you're angry, right? That mad. And I heard from so many patients, as well as experienced myself, I don't know where that reaction came from. Like, I was just like, I just blew up, lost my head. And I never would normally react that way, right?
Yeah.
That's hitting the bottom of the tank.
Yeah. Like a 3-year-old having a temper tantrum. I remember right before my it's rain, started to rain, that I had a flat tire. We're doing a training ride. I was in Hawaii, and I had a total meltdown in this parking lot trying to fix a flat tire, like throwing things down. And it wasn't even a race. We're just going for a ride, but people are waiting for me. And I just like stressed out. And I just remember that. It's like, oh my God, what was wrong with me? But I think we have that as we have our hormones all in disarray.
And I think it's that checks and balances, right? Now we recognize, wait, what's happening physiologically? Like, I will be honest, like I was having a moment this morning, I just kind of want to cry or yell at someone, and I just did. So I was like, Ava, are you up yet? Calling my daughter. I'm like, I need someone to cry or yell at. So you're a reasonable choice. So I always say being 55 with a 13-year-old at home, maybe there's challenges here, right? No, it's all good. But that was a check for myself. Okay, you woke up late, you didn't go to your morning, hot yoga class or a walk or whatever. You didn't do your morning activity. You were rushed. So you didn't do your gratitude journaling and set your goals and intentions for the day, and so like, what can I do now? So it was a quick check, like, okay, make my mighty maca greens, right? Just put that up, mix that real quick, drink that down, have some bone broth, right? So just nourish my body real quick. Let's get some bone broth in you. What can I do for my self-care? And let me just take a moment, do some deep breathing, and, and set forth with the correct intention to the day. What did I have to get done? I like, okay, I'm running behind. I need someone to take Ava to the horses to ride. Quick text out. Thankfully, she's able. You know what I mean? Just like, okay, getting control of it, reasonable, still creating that space for myself. And that's like, this is a practice that's gone on for a decade, right? But it's that resentment is lack of self-care, Debbie. Resentment is lack of self-care. When we're angry and when we're physiologically empty, we're hitting that bottom of the tank. And that's what that feels like. We get bouncing off the walls, right? As opposed to coming from a cup that's overflowing. And I like to say, okay, checking in with happiness. It's a discipline and a practice. It's absolutely a discipline and a practice.
I'm muting myself when you talk now because I'm in this rainstorm wind that's happening. So it's kind of loud here. So I am inside. It sounds like I'm standing outside in the rain. So talking about—
It doesn't actually, your audio is coming through really clear.
Okay, I was talking right into the microphone. So the book MenuPause, why do we need this book? You wrote Keto-Green last year, and I think it's such a good book and easy for people to follow with nutrition, lifestyle habits, and exercise. What is MenuPause? Is that kind of the next step? Or let's talk about that, because I want to dive that into the topic today.
Yeah. And it's a really, it's a progression as you experience, as I experienced my first book, I needed to get out it's almost like my Bible. Every woman needs to read it, the Hormone Fix. But with each book, you can come in at different levels. Like first, it's like you can start with the Hormone Fix, and then you upgrade to the next step, a 16-day Keto-Green plan. Let's get a little bit more serious with this. And now where MenuPause comes in, it's like, okay, well, we're doing all these things. I'm doing all these things for years now, right? And I'm hitting this plateau, or my weight bumping up. What's going on? And so it's looking at specifically this one factor. And I would say it's 25% about nutrition, 75% about everything else. So now we're really honing in to this nutrition piece. But what are the 5 different what are 5 different short, quick ways we can bust through that plateau or that roadblock that's keeping us stuck? So, looking at, okay, our minimum amount is really 6 days that we can expect any reasonable lasting change. And so kind of breaking it down, and then these 5 different plans. So, one very carb restricted or carved up plan, right? Those are 2 different plans. And another is more plant-based plan. Another is more carnivore plan. Another is an autoimmune plan and a fasting plan. So it's these different things, because something like we can be doing the same thing every day. And oh my gosh, I was out with someone, because I'm dating and, and dating. And so I was out with someone and they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, what did you eat for lunch? He's like, oh, chicken salad, because that's healthy for me, right? And he's like, I have that every day. I'm like, well, that's unhealthy for you then. But I'm dating. So you have to be really careful what you say.
Well, I think it's kind of what I keep saying, and it's what I learned in nutritional therapy, that it's, eating real food, nutrient dense, balances your blood sugar. But then as I keep learning, as we gone through these phases of paleo to low carb, keto, carnivore, and then there's AIP and, GAPS diet and all this stuff. It's like, it's not forever. It's that you need to cycle it in, cycle it out. And I love, to learn to be fat adapted athlete, but metabolic flexibility And then it's not like a diet. It needs to be sustainable. So maybe I'll do a pause, as you said, like a reset, do a carnivore for 30 days. Cause I just did, for example, my Vibrant Wellness Food Zoomer panel and food sensitivity that I like had all this inflammation in my body that I didn't know about. And I need to do like bone broth every day, and I need to do more carnivore because all the other foods are reactive. So then I'll do that, but I'm not going to do it for 6 months or a year. And then I'll be ready to like, let's go to the Keto-Green. Or if I'm training more, as in the summer, I might be doing a lot more exercise, then I'll eat more carbs. And I think we get this, you know, everyone's got their different camps of what we should be eating, not individualizing it, not looking at what place are you in your life and your hormones and your activity level, and then like stressors, and really look at what works for me right now is going to be different 2, 3, 4 months from now. So I love how you put it all into one. I mean, it's super smart that you did that. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. It was like thinking there's magic within the pauses. And I agree with everything you just said, that metabolic flexibility. And then you have to ask, well, why? What have I done that's got me to this plateau? And, you know, one of the things, especially when it comes to I think the carnivore plant, for instance, and what created such reactivity to all the foods we're eating. Mm-hmm. And in my research that I've been doing, because I'm doing a future presentation shortly after this is aired in France with the Ministry of France and past president of Ireland and organized by the head of innovation at NASA, on the food chain. And I'm talking about hormone disruptors in the food chain. And the more I get into, Debbie, it's just sinister. I mean, it's really sinister. Like what is being injected into animals? What's still like it's been banned in humans, but we're giving it to animals. Well, where does their feces go? You know, what's manure that's fertilizing the, you know, crops that they're then growing more of our foods in. And, you know, like, so can't say enough about organic, free range, grass fed, no antibiotic use, no other hormones injected. I mean, the list can really go on, but it causes that leaky gut, that overreactivity. What is causing the susceptibility to that overreactivity to normal, healthy, quality foods? And then the ways that we have to go about healing it, like taking that. And one of the plans, the 6-day plans, is a complete gut rest, GI rest cleanse, smoothies, shakes, all hypoallergic, very low reactive. And just to give your intestinal lining this opportunity to heal, as well as, you know, again, a fast in general can be very supportive if we're supporting phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification at the same time. And so that's a kind of that concept of, okay, we're doing these things that are good for ourselves, but we're causing more rub, more harm, more wearing down of certain systems if we're not doing that, you know, doing it in the healthiest way the healthiest way to support our body's natural regeneration. And again, that makes a really big difference. And so that's why MenuPause, that's why I wrote MenuPause. And that's why, you know, created MenuPause. I'm excited to be running through each of the plans with teams outside of my family and test group, right? And so to see the reaction and ability, like for example, that cleanse plan. I mean, I had one woman who we just ran a small group in my Girlfriend Doctor Club through the 6-day cleanse. It's the most challenging one, but for those of us who have been doing Keto-Green and Keto-Green fasting, it's a good plan. And so everyone did amazing during it, but I had one patient, she lost 12 pounds in 6 days, one client. And I was like, wow, man. And she goes, yep. And I stopped right before Thanksgiving. I was down 12 pounds with Thanksgiving and everything. I went up 2 pounds, but I still avoided, really stayed as clean as possible. And she said, she's a month out and she's still down those 10 pounds. And I thought, wonder what inflammation she had so much inflammation, but still we know our gut intestinal lining regenerates in 72 hours. So that's 3 days. So 2 3-day cycles. That was really reparative, restorative, and just decreased a ton of inflammation, water weight, water loss. I call that third spacing of fluid through these leaky membranes that we're sealing. So she didn't regain that. And that's really, it tells me so much about what an individual's been going through or dealing with as we hit each of these plans too.
Yeah, I think, the 72 hours, I think is a point to make. Because I think a lot of people don't realize all the inflammation in their body, as we just went over in a podcast recently on my wheat zoomer and how it tests through Vibrant Wellness lab tests on leaky gut and my reaction to gluten and gliadin and wheat. And I think a lot of people think they're low carb doing keto, but they're kind of doing it with inflammatory foods. And like you say a lot of times no dairy and no gluten, grains, how everyone's different, but how many people have this kind of dirty keto plan or low carb that they're still having gluten in there that could be reactive, or dairy that's causing problems. So do you find like doing, you picked 6 days, is that kind of coming the 6-day number? Is that from what you find, as you just said in your example, of what was most effective and turning things around to start that healing process, healing and sealing the gut?
Yeah, because like 3 days, even a 3-day water fast is often not enough, right? But we know that 72 hours helps that gut, that cellular regeneration. So essentially 2 3-day cycles is the bare minimum, right? I would say the bare minimum. And to find those results, those longer lasting results. So I've gone from 7-day plans to 10-day plans to 16-day plans. But I had been way out at the beginning, 40-day plans. It was my 40-day plan. I mean, really, because it's creating this lifestyle that is important for the continued maintenance and improvement of our health. So it's really like there's no end time, but the minimum amount of time that we need to see results is really, I think, the six day shift, 72 hours for decreasing inflammation and cellular regeneration at the intestinal level, our first line of defense, and improving the gut microbiome, building up the gut microbiome at that same point. And that's where like the plan that I have is very carnivore-ish, right? Carnivore-ish. And it's also the six days. And just see, how do you feel at the end of those 6 days? If you have issues with digestion, you may feel, more bloated. So it's telling you a piece. And so what does that mean? Okay, well, we need to add more enzymes. We need more gut rest to empower our body to break down the food better, what's going on. And so it gives us, each plan kind of will give us a little snapshot into what's happening that we can't see. But I think, food sensitivity testing, of course, hormone panels, all of those are great information to have and to follow, especially as time goes on and we're doing different things, what's working for us and what's working against us.
Yeah, I think that is important to share. And I said that in my intro, getting the Dutch test, getting a GI test, doing organic acids test, a food zoomer. I really like the wheat zoomer and the different panels you can get. I did the egg, corn, dairy, and wheat, but I wish I did the neural zoomer. I swear my brain is damaged because my memory and brain fog, to get that information. So if people don't do labs, how do they know what program to start with? Like, which food plan did we want to get started with? If we're looking as an athlete, maybe, off season, if you're not exercising as much, maybe they choose one plan over another because it's a good time. I always say in the new year, not because it's a new year, but because we're doing less long distance stuff as people might do in the summer. So it might be a good time to do a digestive reset, kind of a gut repair program when they're not exercising. Because I think a lot of people do these 72-hour fasts or do whatever program that they hear out there in social media or for some other podcast, but they don't change their exercise program. So maybe we can touch on, where to start, and then like exercising less might be more beneficial during this time, or when is it okay to do the normal routine, we can talk about.
Yeah. And I think that, so I have what's called MenuPause quiz. So I actually have a quiz that you can take, and we'll provide the links below, but the quiz that you can take to see, okay, well, based on the symptoms I'm experiencing, this is the right place I should start. This is the first place. This may be the best place, but it doesn't mean, like, it means, this is maybe the best one that you're going to move the needle the most with. Possibly let's start here because your symptoms are suggesting this. But again, that's kind of where these questions came in to play, so that we can guide someone, okay, on which plan. But I honestly think it's worth running through every single plan and just taking those, doing a questionnaire after each of the plans. How do I feel, at the end of this? What's my energy level? What's my attitude, right? How's my mental state of being, right? Do I feel nourished and recharged, or do I feel like, man, just worn out, exhausted? And that will certainly tell us a lot.
That's what was just doing a little mini podcast this morning on, for athletes that are fasting and doing low carb, keto endurance athletes, that they're, the female athlete, when they should eat before workouts, and looking at the research on that. But I think a lot of times people don't listen to, how do I feel? And that's so hard for people. What you just said is like, okay, do I feel energized? Do I feel happy? Do I feel brain fog, kind of sluggish or irritable? And I always think it's interesting how many clients I work with, when I do a nutritional therapy food blog and it says symptoms on there, people are like, I don't know. Does dairy make you feel bloated or gassy or meat? I don't know. And so I think that's a big thing, is teach people, pay attention. How do you feel? It's new for a lot of people, and know when, like I call it intuitive fueling, intuitive training, like know when to eat a little something before workout and not feel guilty. Because I think so many women are so driven that we follow those rules to a T, so we kind of forget to pay attention to, how does that make me feel? Yep.
And I think that's, first I want to know, okay, when should we eat? Fasting, not fasting?
Women athletes, it depends if you're doing a low intensity exercise, like, well, it depends if your heart rate goes up in your yoga class and you do the hot yoga, might be different. But if it's a fasted exercise in the morning, I've read what Ben says in other research studies, people can be fasted, men and women, if it's low heart rate. Like I'm going for easy bike ride, walk, spin, something low heart rate, strength training that's not depleting the glycogen, like a HIIT training interval or more of a CrossFit type of workout. But women, where they're doing more of aerobic workout or more of a higher heart rate, they might do better having a little fuel beforehand. And that could be, because I can't eat solid food before I work out. That's why I do often fasted, because I'm just going to regurgitate everything. So having a little collagen MCT oil type of keto creamer in my coffee and water, I'll have some sea salt or LMNT or something like that. And then see if you feel better. Like you said, do I feel better? Is my workout more productive? Do I have more energy? And look at, performance gains versus, oh, I did this. I think a lot of people brag that, oh, I could do this long fasted, I could do this much stuff, and I felt great. It's like, well, could have you been better if you just had a little something calories in? And then it said for women to have a little something, men actually, and women would burn more fat after workout if they had a little something before workout, and then men would be better burning fat doing the fasted exercise and eat afterwards. So it's interesting. And there's not a lot of studies, because women, I would say, you can't get all these females on the same menstrual cycle and track how they feel. It's not going to happen. So we have to really be that intuitive fueling for, fasted exercise, and when to do keto and when to add a little more carbs in there. And I know I've worked with Ben Greenfield. He likes to have people eat more carbs at night, and that will help you give more energy when you work out the next day if you're doing a harder workout, and help your sleep, serotonin to melatonin. So side note on all that. But I think it's just going back to what we're talking about, is like, which food plan is good for me right now, where I'm at today, and how does it make me feel? And learning to be more personalizing in your nutrition plan and more intuitive about changing things up.
Yep. Yep. And then where do we go from there? Okay, I found this. Do I try this next? What are the next steps? And this is true about it's journaling, what feels better for you now, like what, and again, it's seasonally, it's going to change. It's going to change. We can do great, get into a rut. Don't even realize, like, for example, we're eating chicken salad every day, right? You'll realize, okay, well, there's a problem here. We have to change things up, and we have like seasons. There are seasons for a reason, right? For growth and recreation and regeneration. And the same with our physiology. We have to change things up. There are seasons for a reason. And identifying what is causing more harm than good in an intelligent way it's powerful. And plus, again, creating community and discussion. Like, for example, that with athletes and cycling your carbs and your time of the month, like pre-period time. So during premenstrual, right before your period starts, that week or two, certainly the few days before your progesterone levels drop, you're becoming more insulin resistant. So there's more glucose available to feed the new baby growing inside of you, right? So to speak, that's how we are evolved. And that's how these hormones kind of have this evolutionary, contribution to fertility in general. And so what does that mean when we're not, or if we're on a birth control method with a synthetic progestin or high levels of estrogen, or whatever it may be, like, how is that affecting us? And then how do we clear from that? How do we take breaks from that? How do we heal our body from that, as well as break through some of the symptoms that we're experiencing as a result of different factors? And so this is where, of course, it's always understanding, right? It takes more than hormones to fix our hormones. It's understanding where our physiology, our epigenetics come into play, our lifestyle comes into play, and why, there's no one diet that works for everyone, because we are different, but it's more about our lifestyle, our mental, our framework. And that's, I didn't learn that in med school, and I didn't miss a class, right? I didn't learn that in residency. It's just not talked about, but it is critical. There's so much more that we can do as physicians for our patients than what we write on our prescription pad or do with a surgical knife. And it is in that empowering women, especially empowering women and men to be in charge, to feel empowered, to claim their intuition over their own health. What is right for you and your family for the long run, based on your physiology, your mindset, your activity level, your lifestyle, your relationships, and how that all comes into play.
Yeah, so true. So going back to, you're talking about the menstrual cycle and how to eat during the cycle for women. Should we, look at the different food plans, and do you change them at all with like how individualized could we get if we take the menu plans in your MenuPause book and there are 6 days, how can we match that with our menstrual cycle for premenopause?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's mostly the perimenopause, menopause. I'm not thinking about it, just throws in too. Well, are we trying to get pregnant or not get pregnant too at the same time? And if that's the case, we're really trying to get pregnant, then the Keto-Green, really the entire Keto-Green concept is really, really beneficial with the periodic carb up. And I would say, what makes you feel better? Do we carb up, when we're really working for that fertility the week before our cycle? Or do we, do we work with the time we're most insulin sensitive, and that's the few days after we start bleeding, right? So do we carb up during that time? And that's the play. That's the play, but that makes sense physiologically. Yet, where are we at right now? How are we already compromised with our body? And in general, in detoxing, like the plant-based plan, it's just really good. And it's more of a lower carb plant-based plan. So really helps. So you're not going to have cravings and hunger issues and all of that defeats us, that creates some eating disorders. So you have that willpower. Willpower is physiologic, right? If we're driving up and down our sugar, and the same thing with workouts, right? You're driving up and down your sugar. And so you've got to sustain, you've got to balance out that baseline blood sugar curve so that you're not having cravings during it. So I think with like that kind of like working through your menstrual cycle also depends, like say naturally on no birth control, it would, you're trying to get pregnant, it would make sense to really, gosh, you want to detox before pregnancy. I have a whole plan, like before you ever get pregnant, you want to detox your hormones and cleanse. And so I would do a plant-based detox too, if I was planning on getting pregnant, just to clear up all the additional hormones from food we're eating.
So it's probably another show, but just how's the role of the liver play with our hormones? And like we talk about estrogen a lot with my clients, but how does why is the liver so important? I think so many people don't talk about it enough before you start any of these programs to really reset and reboot your body and stand your gut. We want to almost prep our liver before we start losing fat weight. How does it play with our liver, work with our hormones?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is essential for detoxification, the P450 enzyme systems, and where our pathways for liver detoxification phase 2 with methylation, sulfation, and glucuronidation. So in like the menus that I create, I incorporate foods that support those pathways and support liver detoxification. I mean, it's crucial in helping women with fertility through menopause, perimenopause, et cetera. Liver detox is one of the starting points. It's one of the starting points. And that's why I've added liver detoxification support in my Mighty Maca Plus, in my Keto-Green shake powders, because, it's hard to incorporate all the defenses we need on a daily level into our diet, nutritionally speaking.
I think it's an important thing to look at, though, that so many people don't really focus on the liver. And as athletes, I think it's important too for people to work on a liver detox. It's not some fad, but there's a purpose to it. And especially, I think off season when people aren't racing, as I said, winter time is a good time to do a reset and reboot the gut. I think, we just, as I said, did a Wheat Zoomer podcast talking about how athletes are more prone to leaky gut, even if they're not thinking that they're creating problems when they exercise, but over 45 minutes in hot weather, you're causing more damage to your gut wall lining. And I think, again, a lot of athletes think they're so fit and healthy from the inside out, but working on this stuff when you're not in peak race season, I think is so essential to really the performance and longevity part of it, as well as everyone always wants to lose some fat weight. And working on that through nutrition and getting those hormones as leptin and ghrelin to work. And your menu plans will help people with that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because that whole stability piece, I mean, liver detox is essential. I mean, supplementing for liver support during perimenopause and menopause is essential. It's part of every plan that I recommend. I mean, it really is that adding milk thistle, the cat's claw herb, supporting the adrenals with the maca, with, and supporting our sleep cycle. I mean, all of that is part of healthy detoxification regeneration.
So that reminds me of, as I turn 50, I should be preparing for my menopause, and the process, you want to support those adrenals, and no one ever talks about, doctors don't ever say you should be supporting HB axis, because once you go through menopause, who's taken over the adrenals, and the importance of reducing those symptoms. What I love in your book talking about menopause in other countries around the world. Let's talk a little bit about what you found and share in your book, but how we can support our body now so we don't even know we're going through menopause.
Yeah. And I think, one of the big things too that I've seen, especially in our Keto-Green community, And as people do the Keto-Green lifestyle and perimenopause, menopause, they're like, oh, my periods had stopped. Now they started again. I'm like, that is longevity medicine at its best. I mean, really be aware of that. I'm always kind of concerned when someone says, oh, I went through menopause and my periods just stopped. I didn't have any more. That's a red flag to me, especially if they're a little overweight. That's an estrogen dominance. That's a huge red flag that, that person's at risk for endometrial cancer. I mean, that's how my brain starts thinking. What are you at risk for? I mean, what's going on? Versus if you're, because it's very rare to say, oh, my periods were every, 28 days and they just stopped. I mean, that's like red flags galore for me, looking at, okay, you don't have enough progesterone to, cleanse the endometrial lining to oppose the estrogen. And that means estrogen dominance. And now you're at an increased risk of, uterine cancer. And as I've ultrasounded, right, many patients in that situation finding a thickened endometrial stripe, which shouldn't be in the case of perimenopause, right? Should have thinned out uterine lining. And, biopsy showing dysplasia and different hyperplasia for endometrial hyperplasia, or thickening of the uterine lining, or abnormal cells. I mean, all of that, again, huge red flag. So that's, again, to emphasize the point on liver support detoxification, because that's where estrogen dominance is really clogged, is started. And if we can empower the body's natural adrenal hormone productions of progesterone, that has to take the place after our ovaries stop working or have been removed. We're relying on our adrenal glands, and we have to address that. We have to manage that and support our entire HPA axis, with or without a uterus, with or without ovaries, and with or without our periods. And so I just really want to make that point, because I've seen, preventable, I've had to diagnose preventable illnesses or diseases. And that's what I really want to just emphasize. We want to look at that. And as we're going through perimenopause and menopause, understanding how our hormones are associated with our neurotransmitters. So testosterone relates to dopamine, that drive, and sexual receptivity. Estrogen relates to serotonin, for serotonin production and activity. And so that decreased anxiety, and progesterone, is critical for GABA, our hormone of, relaxation and anti-anxiety. I always think of, when I say GABA, the neurotransmitter GABA, I think of the rock group ABBA and the musical Mamma Mia, and it's just that feel good hormone, right? And so, because that's intricately tied in with our emotions and our moods through the perimenopause, again, many people probably listening can relate. I lost that calm. I lost that ease. I lost that resilience, and I'm overreacting instead of responding to situations that otherwise I would, handle much, much better. That's where the neurotransmitters, that's why this time is so critical. It's this neuroendocrine vulnerability. It's this period of neuroendocrine, our neurotransmitters, our neurologic system, and our endocrine hormones, our hormonal system, so the neuroendocrine, and what's happening during this time. And what we really need to understand is that it's, while one of the, we get these spikes during these neuroendocrine symptoms, at the same time, our brain is having more difficulty using glucose for fuel, because gluconeogenesis in the brain is an estrogen, a hormone dependent process, most likely progesterone being the precursor. But we see this sharp increase in a decrease in the brain's ability to use glucose for fuel. But switching to ketones, why the low carb lifestyle, the Keto-Green lifestyle is so important. The use of ketones for brain fuel is not hormone dependent. So when we do that, those neuroendocrine symptoms nearly completely eliminate, if not completely. And we see the resumption of just, great peace, great mood, and maybe normal menstrual cycles. What for a time period until there is that more of a natural transition, because we haven't worn out our body's complete ability to respond in an appropriate way.
So I still want to go back to the Mayan culture. Like, why is other places the women didn't really notice their menopause? And then don't let me forget about fasting, intermittent fasting with these programs, if that's, the Keto-Green Way, the other programs. So talk about the Mayan culture, because I think that's so interesting how other countries, the women didn't really have symptoms that we do in North America with menopause.
Yeah, that is so funny. I totally forgot your question. I went on that tangent because I was just thinking of all these neuroendocrine, what creates that lifestyle. And one of the things is the fasting lifestyle, is more time without food as part of a menopausal like existence, more of the religious involvement and fasting as part of a religion, and taking that role and a mindset too, let alone to some of the foods that we're eating that are supporting, for example, liver detoxification, like spicier foods, and what's happening with that. Yeah.
I always love to hear those stories, like the blue zone study, and just how different places around the world are, doing all these things, as I call the holistic method, all the lifestyle habits you talk about too in Keto-Green, and how it's not just what we eat, but as I say, how we eat, when, why, but also the lifestyle. What are we doing the rest of the day, and how we wake up and start the day? Like you said, you were off this morning because you didn't do your routine that makes you feel good and kind of sets the day up for success, as well as like how we set ourselves up for a good night of sleep, what we do in the morning and at nighttime. And I think you look at the lifestyle habits and the non-intentional fasting that people do in other parts of the world, that we kind of have this processed food, standard American diet, eat all the time. I always learned before I started diving into kind of fasting research, is like, oh, wake up, start your metabolism, you got to eat. And, you got to eat to keep going, and eat every 2 hours. And then you're just like breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, you're eating all the time. So that's why people in other parts of the world probably don't have our horrible eating habits that we have in our country.
Well, and looking the Mayans specifically, right? They look forward to menopause, right? They look forward to that being free of reproduction. So that mindset.
Well, that's a mindset I talk a lot about too, is getting your mind right before any of this stuff, before you start to really dial in, why am I eating this? What's making me want to eat after dinner, and not say the kitchen is closed after this time, I don't need to, I'm not even hungry. Or that mindset of, oh, I need to wake up and eat breakfast because that's what I do. And knowing, when you should take a rest day and go for a walk instead of doing a hard workout. So I think is again, going back to listening to our body, learning how to do that, and learning how to really nurture our soul, our mind, body, spirit.
And our culture, our ethnicity, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
like being able to say, I have more of this, I say survival body type. And in that instance too, like what is the balance? And Mayans, for instance, have a high diet based in herbs and plants. And so what's the genetic for that? But it's also that mindset and that fasting and that cultural kind of, tapping into our genetics. And it's great now that we have the ability to look at our genetics, but remember that's 25% of it, but looking in and seeing, what is our, what supports our genetics at this stage of our life? Mm-hmm. What can we do environmentally? That is also culture-based. I'm Middle Eastern. I'm 0% American. I'm Middle Eastern and Portuguese, and I'm first generation American. So I would say 100% American, first generation. But what I've learned from my mother's side of the family, my father's side of the family, like what diseases they're predisposed to and why. Diabetes on both sides of my family, right? It's why I'm so passionate about helping women and men, but especially women, heal from diabetes. My mom passed away at 67 after struggling for 15 years, undergoing 2 heart surgeries from complications of diabetes and heart disease as a result of this survival body type, not appreciated, honestly, in our American medical Society, the ADA dietary recommendations are just appalling. You get 3 meals, 3 snacks, eat throughout the day. Hello, you're a survivor body. Well, if any, no, never, right? Never. But anyway, if you're a survival body type, like that is digging your grave, right? That is essentially digging your grave. And it's like, no, you need more fasting. Intermittent fasting has to be part of your lifestyle. And I looked at the cultural changes, the cultural differences to my mom's family. Sunday's a fasting day. You eat 1 meal a day almost on Sundays, right? I mean, that's part of a strong Catholic tradition in my family, but that was a strong, you don't eat before church on Sunday and you eat 1 big meal as a family, and maybe you'll have a leftover later on, but not really. Like we're having 1 meal as a family on Sunday after church. That's it, right? But you wonder how much of that that evolved as a tradition based on health, based on longevity, based on, the physicians to the king were the chefs that prepared their food. So that, honored that physiology. So I think of these things and I think it's really powerful. And when we have these warrior genes, these survival genes, like the Native Americans, for instance, we're more easily insulin resistant. We will form more muscle faster than someone else, like for example, Scandinavian lineage will form typically more muscle. And that's because of our insulin resistance and higher tendency for testosterone. So I'm going to honor that physiology. And I think that's where a little bit of this play with MenuPause came in, to experiment what suits you now, because the way we've been taught to eat as a culture, if we're talking about growing up in America, maybe suburban Georgia, where I spent the last 25 years of my life, what does that, what has that done to help us, to serve us, or destroy us? So we look at those things, and then touch base with our ethnic roots. I was designed this way. You'll appreciate this, Debbie. I had a client, actually a journalist, interview me for a magazine on PCOS, and she was asking me all these questions about increase of acne and weight gain and just really, forming muscles really quickly. And I paused her and I said, those are, like you're focusing on the negative. The beautiful aspect of what you've been designed to do is to be that warrior. You're going to lead the troops to war. You're going to defend your city. You're going to, be that your sharp wit, intelligent mind, ability to fast longer, form muscle faster, all of those things, those are gifts. That's the Amazonian characteristic. And she just started crying. She goes, I've been all my life just, felt self-conscious about my big shoulder muscles, and then getting this acne. I'm like, we just have to switch things a little bit to increase your insulin sensitivity through lifestyle by design that you're intended to thrive in. And I'll never forget that, because, of course I remember her tears, but, just that shift, she said, and she wrote me a beautiful thank you. She goes, you've changed the way I view myself. And, and I said, by design, you're an amazing Amazonian woman. Congratulations. Different way to look at what she's been labeled at as PCOS.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. What I think the main thing is to talk about is personalizing nutrition, and really learning about what works for you, trying out these different food plans, start with the Hormone Fix, though, I think, and Keto-Green, and then read this new one. I think it's really important in how to play in the exercise in there and the lifestyle habits and where fasting fits in. Really individualize it. So I just realized the time, we can just talk for hours with you. The Girlfriend Doctor Show is so easy. Just have a cup of tea with Dr. Anna and just chat for hours. So where can people find you and learn more about this? We've got the book coming out and all sorts of different gifts. So share away what we can get and what you're up to.
Yeah, thank you. So we've got a lot going on with my MenuPause book launch going on, including the MenuPause quiz with where to start. So that's a fun thing. Easy to connect with me at dranna.com. So dranna.com, and at the Girlfriend Doctor on social media. So, and I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing the questions and the conversation that's coming up. And we're launching, once MenuPause comes out, we'll be launching in my Girlfriend Doctor Club, just cycling through each of those six-day plans. So I hope everyone listening will join me there.
That is so fun. So any conferences you're speaking out in North America next year?
Yeah. Besides France, I will be speaking at KetoCon in Austin, Texas, one of my all-time favorite conventions. I will be speaking there, and I'll be speaking at the Keto Summit in September in New York, in the New York area, and KetoCon's in Austin, Texas. And I know there are other ones on the way. We'll usually put up where to find Dr. Anna in my emails. I have to look myself.
Yeah, well, good. I look forward to seeing you, at least in Austin. I'll be there. And I know my topic is tips for fueling training, performing the low carb athlete. So I'll be diving into research the next few months, because a lot to dive into there, but that's what they want to go into. And what's your focus next year and sharing on your conferences, your topics?
Oh, at KetoCon?
Yeah.
Probably hormones, menopause, and keto.
Yeah, perfect. All right. I know you got to probably go to another meeting. So thank you for your time today and chatting with me. And I might be stuck up here all day because it's like wind and rain flowing. So I keep thinking of Wizard of Oz and being stuck in the roof blows off. So thank you, Dr. Anna. Have a wonderful day. And thanks for sharing your new information, new book, and all the links I'll put in the show notes.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.